All right, let's talk about The Godfather. I've been watching some of the team meetings, and some of you are getting it, and some people are still kind of working on that connection of culture and how it shows up in a conversation. It's really important you develop the skill of identifying communication cultures. That's the point of the children's book assignment. I'll be really listening to how you're describing cultures. If you're still struggling with this, make a appointment to talk to me or just send me an email. I'll call you back on the phone. I'm going to be traveling around because I'm working on a documentary film, but I am available by phone, even if we can't jump on a Zoom call over the next few days. So for The Godfather, I just love this scene. This is the opening scene of the movie. There is no reason to know anything else about the movie. You don't need to know it because we want to listen to the actual words they're saying. So in Sicilian tradition, on the day of a daughter's wedding, the father is allowed to grant wishes. That's part of the culture. So in the culture of granting wishes, the godfather at this big reception wedding for his daughter, he's in his home office and there's a line of people outside the godfather's office coming with requests. Now, we don't know that quite yet. We start to get that later on, that's what's going on. But we have this incredible opening scene of the stricken father, the father in grief, in contrast to the day of a father in joy as his daughter is married. So we have these two contrasting kind of father figures, Bonsanera in grief, Don Carlone in the place of power and privilege. Now, in general, these two men are both the same economic status in the culture. They're both first immigrants, first generation immigrant Americans. They both come from the same, not just the same country, but we can imagine they come from the same like province or area of Sicily. So their generational culture is the same. Yet as they come into America, they both take two different paths. And this is the story of the melting pot. And Bolsonaro in this incredible close-up and narrative is really talking about the path of being a good American. And he wanted to raise his daughter in that American tradition. Now, as we translate that into the communication cultures, what he's talking about is he goes from a high context collective culture, and he's raising his daughter in an individual, low context culture. So if you're talking about individualism, collectivism, high context, low context, high power, low power, and uncertainty avoidance, if you're hitting any of these notes, you're starting to understand this conversation. So his daughter, he gave a lot more autonomy to, and she ended up in a very brutal, violent situation. And as we know, Bolsonaro could not get justice in the American courts. And so he says, I said to my wife, we must go to Don Carlone for justice. So here we are. He is pleading for justice. And Don Corleone, no matter, these two men are in a conversation, go back and listen to it. And if you need the version with captions because the accents are thick, just put in opening scene of Godfather captions and you'll be able to find it pretty easily, or I can throw you that link. Now, Don Corleone and Bolsonaro, they're in two different conversations. They're not in the same conversation. Bolsonaro keeps saying things and Don Corleone says things, but they are not responding to each other at all. They are not listening. And the conflict is escalating between the two of them, where Bolsonaro comes in with a conflict with the American justice system, with these two boys who brutally beat his daughter. His conflict is, and he's having an internal conflict of the choices that he made as a father figure. But then the he cannot, he's so flooded, he cannot listen to Don Corleone. The Godfather keeps saying, my wife is godfather to your only child. Yet you never come and visit. You never ask me out for coffee. We don't go to the movies. We don't do anything together, right? And Don Corleone is moving into that relationship dimension where Bolsonaro is staying very low context and saying, I want justice. I want these boys murdered. I want them killed for what they did to my daughter. And Don Corleone says, why didn't you come to me first? Why don't you want to be friends with me? He's like having this conversation about friendship, which is Don Corleone is having a high context conversation. And then the point in the conversation where things shift, where they move into this place of where it's escalated into its highest conflict place, is when Bolsonaro, not listening to the Godfather about friendship, says, how much should I pay you? This is a very American thing to say. Bolsonaro is fully in the melting pot of America. Very low contest, direct, get straight to the point. How much should I pay you? That ain't gonna fly in high context culture, that kind of directness. It's offensive and rude, and it forces the Godfather into a more explicit conversation. He moves out of high context. He says, Bolsonaro, what have I ever done for you to treat me so disrespectfully? And that is in reaction to Bolsonaro's low context comment, how much should I pay you? Right? So this is a very important moment. And I want you to think about, why would that be so offensive? I want to pay you. In American culture, I want to pay you is how I show you respect. This is how I honor you, by giving you money. But Godfather knows the high context message. He knows the relationship dimension of money and what's hidden under the surface with that phrase. And if he actually took money, which he doesn't, right? Because I want you to think, who pays you? Who pays you? When you get money, where do you get your money from? You get it from people in power. People in power give you money. Your boss gives you money, right? And when you get money from your boss, it's for servitude and for accountability to the boss, to the company, whoever that is. So the Godfather hears the high context message that Bolsonaro is not delivering when he says, how much should I pay you? But the Godfather hears it and he says, why would you treat me so disrespectfully? What he's saying is, why do you want to be the boss of me? You ain't the boss of me. I'm the boss. You know, if there's going to be money, I'm going to pay it. You're not going to pay me. Right. And this is a really crucial thing to be able to hear. Now, as this relationship dimension and all the things that the Godfather mentions are very collective culture, including collective cultures have strict hierarchies, right? Remember what I said in my lecture, that the people when kids are growing up in a collective culture, they don't choose what they're going to do, but it's not chosen by their parents either. It's usually chosen by grandparents or elders or decisions that are community-based by higher powers. So collective cultures have strict high power distance. And we can go into the high power distance, low power distance of just the fact that of having access to the Godfather. We don't see it in the very beginning of the scene, but he's not alone in the room. He doesn't get to be alone in the room. There are people in the room, which is why it's startling when he stands up and moves to the Godfather and whispers, I want them murdered. And the Godfather, who has his own brand of ethics. So the Godfather is working from ethics, that I cannot give you justice because your daughter still lives, right? So there's this piece. And this all plays into what is that the Godfather in more power is going to decide the ethical judgment of what is right and wrong in this situation. And then once Bolsonaro leaves the room, he's talking to his adopted son, who is also the family lawyer, played by Robert Duvall. He says to him, get Clemens on this, make sure he does it right. We are not animals, despite what this undertaker thinks of us. Okay, so Bolsonaro is an undertaker. He has a home for funeral services. And so we know he's a prosperous businessman. And the way Bolsonaro came in and the way he said, I didn't want to get into trouble, really shows the way he thinks about this culture, that he did want to be separate from it, and has to now engage in it. So that is a really telling, important piece, that the Godfather understands the perception of Bolsonaro of him. You'll have to watch the movie to see how Bolsonaro saves the Godfather's life later on. I don't want no spoilers, but Bolsonaro comes in at a crucial point. Oh, anyone wants to come over and watch these movies with me, I'm totally up for a good Godfather watch party anytime. Of course, I will have to pause it every now and then and talk about it because I'm obsessed. Slightly like this much. All right, everybody. I hope that helps understand a way to dissect and look at a scene using the communication, culture, intercultural things that we've been talking about. Bye.